And the animals may flee from the male lion, who will roar, and while they're fleeing from the male lion, the females will be hiding along the trail up the other way. And as the animals come running by, then the female will grab them and destroy them. You see, a lion is an animal that exists by feeding on other animals that is weaker than he. And they do that not through loudness and threats and openness, but they do it through subtlety and patience and diligence and exploitation. And teenagers, that's the way the devil works. If the devil destroys your life, if he ruins, you're any man, this way he'll do it. He'll watch that man till he finds his weakness. And the devil knows human nature. He knows it very well because he's been around so many years and he's worked with so many of us. And the devil already knows what your weakness is. He knows where your weaknesses are, teens. If right now you're homesick, he knows that. And he'll put a million reasons in your mind why you ought to drop out of school and quit. If you've got a temper, the devil knows that. If you've got a desire to be popular to such a degree that you'll do wrong to be popular, the devil knows that. The devil, brother, he knows your limp. He knows your weakness. And I'll tell you what, he'll exploit it if he can. You got to be sober. You got to be vigilant. For your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. When I was a kid, we traveled in revival meetings with my parents. My dad was an evangelist, Bill Rice, and we had, back when I was a boy, we had an old Hudson Hornet car, and we'd travel in revival meetings all over the United States. And my brother Bill and my hearing sister Kay and we traveled with my parents in meetings. We sang every night. We were called, of all things, we were called the Rice Krispies. And we'd sing, and we went all over the United States. We had pets. The Rice family, we have always loved animals. We've always had pets. We have pets. We've had pets ever since I can remember, we've had pets. Besides 100 head of horses and a herd of cattle and so on, and dogs and cats and so on, we've had all kind of pets. I remember one time we had a pet deer. We got out in Durango, Colorado. We had a pet skunk. That was a stinking thing. We had a pet coon named Tennessee Ernie Ford. We had a pet possum. We had pet sheep. We had some buffalo one time. We got some American bison and brought them out there and kept them on our ranch. And we had everything. And among other things, one time we had a pet lion. We were coming back from revival meetings in California, driving across the Texas Panhandle, and we stopped to get some gas at one of these roadside zoos. You don't see them much anymore, but before the interstates came in, they had roadside zoos everywhere, and they would advertise them for miles, and it would say 20 miles down the road, stop at the roadside zoo and get something to eat and get some gas and see the zoo and so on and so forth. We stopped at one of these roadside zoos. When we went in to pay for the gas, my dad went in to pay for the gasoline. There in the office of the filling station, this man had a little lion cub. She was 3 days old. She didn't even have her eyes open yet. I remember she was walking around bumping into everything. And this guy had a pride of lions. He probably had about a dozen lions in a little roadside zoo. He didn't need any more. So my dad just said to him, said, "Hey, I'll buy that lion from you, African lion." He said, "I'll buy that little cub from you." The man said, I'll sell her to you. And so my dad bought her. We stopped to get some gasoline. When we walked out the door, we had an African lion. And that's just the way we did things. We brought the African lion home. She grew up, traveled around with us, grew up in our home. Everybody, it was the funniest thing, because everybody was scared to death of her. I tell you what, you could put her on a leash and walk down the sidewalk, and I want you to know, you had respect. I'll tell you what, boys. Some old guy had a Doberman Pinscher, he thought it was tough. I just say, well, look, my house cat can whip your dog. That lion was something else. We had more fun with her. I remember just before she died, or not too long before she died, she finally got so big that we couldn't afford to keep her any longer. We couldn't afford to feed her. She was getting to a place where she was eating 20 pounds of horse meat a day. And every horse on our ranch was getting nervous prostration. So we kept her at the zoo in Memphis, Tennessee. We still owned her, but they kept her for us. One time my dad was coming back from revival meetings, came through Little Rock and up through Memphis. He'd been driving all night. He got to Memphis about 9 o'clock in the morning. The zoo was just opening up. And my dad said, I think I'll go see Noel real quick at the Lion House. He went in, parked in the parking lot, and went in to the zoo, went over to the Lion House, went inside, couldn't find her, went outside, and he found her. And when he found her, he hollered and said, "Hey, Noel, where are you? There you are!" And oh, she roared. She was so glad to see him. My dad walked up and he climbed over the rail. You know how you have these brass rails and things in front of the cage? He climbed over the rail and walked up and he put his hands up through the bars like this. And Noel, she reared up and put her paws through the bars. And oh, she began to love on my dad. My dad was patting her and loving on her. And she was making all kind of noise just like your dog does when you're gone a long time. You come home and they cry and stuff. And she was going, and about that time, see, the zoo had just opened up. And about that time, in came two ladies came walking down. They looked. There was this man. This lion was going, and they thought my dad was getting eaten alive. One fainted on the spot. The other screamed and took off running. In about a minute, half the zoo was there to try to separate this man that was getting mauled. But we had a good time with Noel. We loved her. But here's what I wanted to tell you. When we were going to revive meetings, when Noel got bigger, we couldn't take her with us in our station wagon. So by this time we had a station wagon, so we put her in a cage. And this cage, we had a Great Dane dog then named Super. And we put Noel and Super in the cage together, and this cage had chicken wire. And I suppose it was 10 feet tall. And Noel could not get out. Anyway, she could get out. And when we go to meetings, my dad hired a man to feed her. Well, this guy was scared to death of that lion. Just scared to death. He took her feed trough and he moved it over against the fence so he'd never have to go in. And when he'd feed her and water her, he'd just pour the feed or the water through the fence. He wouldn't go inside because he was scared of her. And everything that happened while we were gone in meetings, when we'd come home, if anything went wrong, he'd blame it on that lion. We'd have a tree that'd fall down a mile or two away in the back of the ranch. When we get home, that man would tell my dad, "Your lion got out of that cage and went and knocked down this tree." Everything was the lion's fault. And, it was a little bit irritating to us. Well, this guy began to lose some chickens. He had some chickens. He'd go out into his front yard, and he'd find a chicken out there in his front yard with its head cut off. So he came to my dad and said, "Your lion is killing my chickens." My dad said, "Well, where are they?" "In my front yard." Well, my dad said, the lion cage is way out behind your house. How could my lion be killing your chickens if they're in the front yard? "Well, I don't know." "Well, what's happening?" He said, "Well, their heads are cut off." Well, my dad said, "How do you know it's not a fox or something that's getting them?" The man said, "Well, if it was a fox, they'd eat the chicken." Well, my dad said, "Great day in the morning. If it was a lion, they'd eat the chicken." I mean, how do you always blame everything on my lion? And this Mr. Scott said, "Well, I'll tell you right now, if you'll check, if you'll watch it, I'll tell you right now, you'll find out that your lion is killing my chickens." My dad said, "Okay, I'll watch." So one day he went down near the lion cage. He went over to the pen and sat down over here on a log. And he watched old Noel. She was over here. Noel was laying down next to her feed trough, which is up against the fence. It was full of grain. Noel wasn't moving a muscle. She wasn't flipping her tail. She wasn't batting an eye. She wasn't moving a muscle. She sat that way motionless like a statue for 20 minutes. Sure enough, after a while, here came a chicken. Chicken came down off the hill, pecking and clawing, scratching and going along. And all of a sudden that chicken looked up and she saw that feed trough full of feed. Now, I suppose she saw the lion too. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is the lion didn't move, and so after a while she must have figured out that the lion wasn't alive or something. I don't know what